Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of FSU Coach. My name is Tim Baghurst, host of the show. And joining me today is Rebekah Trittipoe. Rebekah, you're a career coach. You've had a lot of experience in a lot of different areas.
I
And,
have.
and really, you're on this show to talk about athletic coaches. You're a career coach, and so much of that transcends into what we do as coaches. So give us a little bit of background of how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's a rather circuitous route, which I think anyone who's had life experience realized that
Mhm.
it's not always a straight line to a career. I started off coaching and teaching um, out of college. Actually, I started doing steroid radioimmunoassays and then went and got my teaching and coaching, did that for a number of years. Then I went into medicine. I found this very small, specific career in cardiovascular perfusion. And so I did my training at the medical school at Ohio State and spent about 25 years in cardiac surgery.
Mhm.
After which, I went back to coaching, then teaching, then sports ministry, actually, for 6 years with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And now I'm a career coach. So and I've authored a couple books in there in the meantime. So here I am.
Yeah, career coach is an interesting title because I, if I search coach on Google, I come up with all kinds of stuff. Life coach, spiritual coach, career coach, sport coach, you name it. What is really your role and how do you help people?
Well, a coach by definition, the origin of the word is taking people of importance from one place to another. And so that's what an athletic coach does. That's what a career coach does. We have a lot of students, and I'm the career coach for the School of Health Sciences, but I also have the straight sciences, chemistry, biochem, biopsych, biotech, all those kind of things. But, there's a lot of kids that come to school and they don't have a clue what they want to be when they grow up. So we can provide some direction, but then also give them strategic advice in terms of what they need to do to go from point A to point B. That's the role of a coach, to take them from where they are to where they want to get. So, we equip them with all the standard tools in terms of how do you prepare career documents, whether it's a resume, a CV, cover letters, personal statements for medical school, PT school, PA school, whatever, and then internships. So it's a wide gambit, but it's developing that relationship with these kids that makes a career coach or any coach effective.
Mm. When we talk about coach careers, I'm curious what your just general perspectives are of the coaching profession. We have volunteer coaches who may be doing it because they're a parent.
Sure.
We may have the club coach who is doing it probably to pay the bills and develop a reputation that gets them more clients, which gets them more income and maybe notoriety. We have high school who uh, for many coaches, I think, are doing it for the love of the job because their stipends are so poor that many of them actually pay money to coach the sport. And then we move up into collegiate and professional, where collegiate, yes, you can make a lot of financial gain from coaching in college, but many don't, especially as you go into the Olympic sports, the Division II, Division III, and then the professional coaches as well, who may see this is their vocation, and the success of one or two individuals determine their status as a coach,
Sure.
perhaps. How do we as coaches navigate the world of coaching to make sure our career is successful? That's a very open, broad question,
Yeah, thanks a
given the
lot.
different levels. But I do want coaches to understand that there's, what is success, first off? How do you define it? But then how do I progress other than, well, I've been in this coaching position for 20 years because I didn't know how to move on or what to do in order to move on.
Yeah, that is very broad question, rather lengthy question. I think when you get into coaching, if you're coaching out of obligation, that's a horrible position to be in. Just like if you go to a job every morning out of obligation rather than seeing it as a calling, I think that's sort of pitiful, and it makes life miserable. So when we coach, we have to understand that it's not just the scoreboard, but realistically, a lot of coaches live and die by this scoreboard because not everyone has the understanding that so much more than the win-loss column goes into coaching. It's those relationships that are built. It's the maturity of our athletes. It's the growth of not only our athletes, but of ourselves. And I think a lot of poor decisions are made if we only look at performance. For example, the All Blacks rugby team from New Zealand. There's been a lot written about them, but they lost in the quarterfinals of the World Championships in 2007. They had a stellar team, and they are a stellar team. I think of the 21, 22 teams that have played on the world platform, they've never lost to about 13 of them. They have a winning record against all of them, but 2007 was just a horrendous loss. They had the best players ever, but they failed miserably. And there was all kinds of mayhem that went on the week and the night before the game and so forth. But the administration of the team said, you know what? They had an epiphany. We've got to stop recruiting on the basis of pure talent. What we have to do is start recruiting on the basis of character. And so they developed over time 15 mantras that were going to represent their team. And as a result, and the idea is that better people make better anythings. Better people make better All Blacks. So when they started considering the character component, guess what? That automatically drives performance. You don't make great efforts to develop character skills like Brett Ledbetter's work, terrific work. But he makes a point. If you sort of deconstruct all the hugely successful teams, they have one thing in common. They have great character, and character does drive performance. But we get in trouble when we let performance compensate for character shortcomings.
Yeah,
and then we really get in trouble. We recruit in our problems, which is just stupid.
I was reading a story from a coach who was scouting a player who was hugely talented, very successful on the field, but noticed some behavioral attitude issues in interacting with the coaching staff and the other players. So that person passed on giving that individual a scholarship. That individual went to another school, got a scholarship, and after about half the season was no longer playing on the team. And that coach went to the other coach and said, we were interested in this player, kind of what happened. And the response was, she turned out to be the most toxic person on our team, regardless of talent. The challenge is for many coaches identifying good character athletes and bad character athletes within, for a lot of situations, especially in college, within a short time frame. We can only do so much on investigating social media or doing parents and even when we apply for jobs, right? My job interview was a few meetings that lasted a few hours, where maybe it's a dog and pony show, where I could be awesome and people love me, but really once you get to know me, So how do we identify those character athletes where we say, okay, you may not be the superstar, but I really want you on my team because you're going to drag everybody to get better? Are there any keys, any indicators for coaches that might help?
Well, it certainly is difficult when you have limited time, and people can fake it, the old fake it till you make it. And unfortunately, folks can figure out what you want to hear, and then they can give it to you. Shoot, our kids, right? They're
Yeah.
pretty good at giving us back what they know we want to hear. But I think even just watching them on the sideline, having an informal conversation with teammates, if that's even possible, and not being so bold and obvious, like, well, what's he like, when you're just out with friends, but trying to, I guess, ferret out those things that can't be faked so much. If you can talk to teachers, teachers will tell you what kind of student they are. If they're miserable in the classroom in terms of behavior, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to be miserable on the field. And I like this. How do they speak to their parents? Because if they don't show respect to their parents, they're not going to show a coach respect. How do they speak to their teammates? How do they speak to their coach? And I think it's difficult. It's a challenge, but I think it can be done. And I think it's imperative, because then we will get stuck with someone who's toxic, and we've got to get rid of them. Even some of my friends and associations on, for example, LinkedIn, that Chad Gono, owns a plastics company in Texas, but he basically is the coach of a huge, huge company. And his posts are always, you cannot put up with toxicity. You've got to get rid of people. Don't hire the resume, hire the character, hire the person, It's tough, and it can be scary, because particularly if you're in a high profile program where if you don't win, you'll get canned, which unfortunately is the way it works in a lot of cases. I think coaches are scared to pass on a super talent because they think that they can't win without a super talent. When I ask any coach with a decent amount of experience, what would you rather have? Someone with really, really good skill and great character, or someone with great skill and horrible character? I'll take the kids that are a little less skilled. You can teach skill. Character is harder to develop.
Yeah, I want to go back to, you talked about the All Blacks losing and then developing these pillars, and I remember this actually happening. So I understand what they did, but it required the administration to recognize that winning is not everything. And unfortunately, you also just alluded to, in many administrations, winning is everything.
Yeah.
What can coaches do to help educate administrators, such as athletic directors, to understand that their purpose is more than winning and losing, and that it's okay sometimes to not do well on the field?
Oh, man, you really like to ask hard questions. Thanks so much. Oh, goodness. I think it's sitting down and having discussion, because, like I said, athletic directors in high profile programs, there's all kinds of pressure that they have with donors, with alumni. And I think an athletic director has to give some kind of bandwidth, I guess, and time frame for a coach to develop. Because what we're talking about, character skill development, does not happen overnight.
No.
And even as a coach, it's going to be a process to figure out what works with one team one year won't work another year because your personnel has changed. But I think these really hard discussions with ADs in terms of, okay, look, this is what I'm doing. This is the reason why I'm doing it. This is what I expect to happen. I can't promise that it's going to happen. But in a way, I think those kind of high level coaches have to just accept the fact I'm going to do what's right because it's right. And if the results don't follow, then that's unfortunately the way it is. And you have to almost accept that as a possible outcome.
I think as well, there has to be an effort from the coach to determine, maybe during interview processes, et cetera, to find out whether the athletic director or the administration is offering lip service versus the truth.
Sure. Look at the history too.
Yes, because if I'm coming in and I'm talking about developing individuals, and if I develop individuals, success often follows as a byproduct of that. But if I'm developing individuals, maybe I need a year or two to clean house, to start again, to foster that culture. And that athletic director, if I'm in that interview, they want me as a coach, maybe oh yeah, absolutely, we understand. And then 2 years in, no, we don't understand. There's a challenge there to have that real conversation of, are we on the same page here? Do we have the same philosophy? So coaches perhaps need to be asking those questions as well during that interview, rather than the athletic director, what's your coaching philosophy?
Yes, I think so. You know, when we send our kids out to, for example, do an internship, it's a two-way street. The company gets to know the kid gets to know the company. If it's a good fit, 80% of the time it turns into an actual job. And I think it's the same way with an AD and a coach. It's a two-way street. And you've got to have a period of time where you are getting to know each other. But again, another analogy to the career world, you go on something like Glassdoor, you can see other people's experiences with a certain company. Well, I'm sure that if you talk to prior coaches, you could probably figure out what the tenor or the culture of an organization is just by talking to previous coaches, previous athletes. See how many transfer out. And of course, on a college level, this transfer portal has just changed everything because there's not a lot of loyalty anymore.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a minute as we talk to Rebekah. The mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring. All of our classes have the word coach or coaching in them, and they're taught by coaches for coaches.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills, even some of the mental performance behind what it goes into being an athlete. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach. So I thought joining this master's program would help me learn different ways to attack my job. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
And we're back in. We're talking with Rebekah Trittipoe about coach careers and we're going into the weeds a little bit, which is fun. When we talk about coaches moving up, moving on, etc., what are some of the suggestions you have for making that transition? The reason I ask this is for those of us who are you're in the same career as a coach. We do this because we care about people. We want to see people succeed. We want to help them. And it can be very difficult for coaches to walk away from a position where they are helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had that experience myself, moving careers, of walking away from students where one day I'm helping you and the next I'm selfishly going somewhere else and leaving you to the wolves, so to speak. Do you have any advice on how coaches can navigate that transition? Because I think it's a struggle. We don't want to walk away from things we've built. We don't want to walk away from people we know will be hurt by our departure.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that because I've made a number of different career transitions, and there's always, you leave a bit of yourself behind every single time. But I think those transitions go better if we know that we've done our absolute best in that position that we are leaving. If we haven't become dull and a one-trick pony, if we're constantly trying to coach creatively and coach holistically, that's a huge thing. And I think if we feel like we've put in the effort, we've really accomplished those kind of things, then I think it's easier to pack your bag and move on to the next, being grateful for lives that have been impacted, but embracing the adventure of going forward to another group. And sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, I'm starting over. Sometimes you do feel selfish, like, oh man, what are these kids going to do without? But if we've really done our purpose and we've succeeded where we're at, we can be confident that that work will continue somehow, some way, and we can serve other people going forward.
I'm just taking notes while you talk. Great advice. The challenge in coaching, I've done almost 150 of these interviews with people across different sports. And one of the things that I hear time and time again is how important networking is in terms of career transitions, getting that next job, even getting a job. It's who you know, quote unquote.
Yeah, 100%.
But I also think that that's a disservice to many coaches out there who are very, very good at their job. Maybe they're not good at social media or networking or being friends with the right people or hanging out in the wherever it is with all the other coaches. That, to me, a lot of times this networking comes from perhaps the outgoing characters who are more than happy to go to that event and hang out with everybody and work the room, versus maybe the introvert, the quiet one, who's very, very good at their job, but that's not really their scene.
Yeah. How
do you, as a coach, get a job in a situation where oftentimes word of mouth carries a lot of weight? Do you have any ideas or suggestions on what coaches can do to maybe break into that network, break into those job opportunities where they otherwise wouldn't be looked at simply because they don't know the right people?
Yeah, well, certainly there's some obvious things in terms of continuing education, whether they be workshops, seminars, offer to provide one, to be a speaker. Those are really fun, and I enjoy those kind of opportunities. I eat them up, so that's really fun. But I'm actually more introverted than extroverted, even though I speak a lot. I'm in front of people. I appear to be outgoing.
I understand that.
Yeah, but I tell our students too, there's this juxtaposition between being braggadocious in our networking and our social media and understanding that we are actually a brand. How can we do that without being obnoxious? And so one of the things that we teach our students, for example, with LinkedIn, and word of mouth is great. And it's hard when you think about this statistic. but about 85% of all jobs that are filled were never advertised. So it begs the question, how in the world do you hear about these jobs? It's because somebody told somebody who told somebody. So yes, you do have to keep your ear to the ground to see what positions might come up. And I think overall, coaches are a pretty tight-knit group. They know if somebody is going to be leaving one school and going somewhere else, so that leaves a hole there. But one of the complicating factors is oftentimes, particularly on a college level, when there's a coaching change, the entire staff is disrupted. So they might take the whole staff. So then that leaves a well for another staff to come in. So there's that. But I think just really LinkedIn, I'm not a huge social media person. I have it because I sort of need it for a number of different reasons. But LinkedIn really is, it's not, your grandma's Facebook. You don't post what you're going to have for breakfast. You try to put content that is actually meaningful on there. But we teach our students how to use the search, how to, if you're a graduate of FSU, well, then get on FSU's page, look at the alumni, look at people working in your field. And so we teach these kind of concepts. We do the same thing for our Liberty students, because a lot of times if you can find someone that has an equal interest, not an equal interest, but similar interests or a common ground, they're much more likely to connect with you and be helpful. So it's just a decision that you make. Am I going to do this or not? And I think of all the social media platforms for the professional, LinkedIn is really, really helpful. But you've got to be listening. It's unbelievable how many contacts I've made just because someone mentioned someone's name and then I go talk to them and they talk to someone else. It really is a very sophisticated game of whisper down the lane. But it's a skill. It's just something you have to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think every social media platform is different and meets a different group and a different clientele. Sure. And we're seeing a younger generation, for example, a coach is trying to recruit. They shouldn't probably be on LinkedIn looking for that next superstar athlete. It is going to be on Instagram or TikTok or whatever comes next. And as coaches, I think we have a challenge to be adaptable to those changing times so that we stay to some extent relevant, whereby we know where people are, we know where the job market is, we know the coach is looking for jobs because we're on those sites, rather than, well, I only use Facebook. And if I don't find it on Facebook, then it's not relevant to me. There's a real challenge to stay relevant.
No, you're absolutely right. I have a colleague who has a star football player kid, and they're utilizing all those social media platforms as a kid. And I mean, he's recruited by all the big dogs across the nation. And it's pretty stellar what their approach is to that. I think if you're looking to recruit kids, LinkedIn isn't necessarily where they are, even though here at Liberty, we're even pushing our students for NIL and so forth to have a presence on LinkedIn, because they're not always going to be a college athlete. Mm-hmm. They're actually going to move out into like the real world, the non-athletic world for most of them. Mm-hmm. But for coaches, networking with other coaches, athletic directors, I think probably LinkedIn is probably the place to be for that kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. For the college kid, for the high school kid, no, they're not going to be all that active on LinkedIn.
I'm gonna add to that and say, based on my experiences, I found that Twitter, we'll call it X or we'll call it Elon, whatever you want to call it, is a great place for coaches to communicate as well. I found a lot of interaction on Twitter with athletic directors and coaches probably more so than LinkedIn, even
Okay.
though there is that big LinkedIn base. It's just my experiences.
Sure.
So I think coaches need to have some kind of access to multiple systems. It can't just be I do this and that's it. And if you're not on this, then we never connect. I
Yeah,
think
true that.
we've got to be flexible in that. What I want to be respectful of your time. So what advice do you have for coaches in general, given your experience working with them, working with athletes? What lasting impressions do you want to impart?
I think be creative in your coaching. A lot of us coach the way we've been coached, which sometimes can be good, sometimes maybe not so good. But if we really want to coach holistically, we have to coach on all three dimensions. The first dimension would be the physical stuff, like the strength, agility, speed, balance, quickness, cardiovascular conditioning, all those kind of things. On sort of a second dimension would be those things like team cohesion, problem solving, the emotional component, the motivation, that kind of thing. But then if we really want to reach our students or athletes, we have to coach on the third dimension, which is a little deeper. It's the significance, the identity, perseverance, sacrifice, character skill development. So if we're going to be a great coach, we have to coach on all three dimensions. And of course, there are very creative ways to do that. If you want to, work on speed and agility, you don't have to just do suicides. There's a million different ways. It's not a bad thing if your kids actually have fun. I'm not talking that your practices become frivolous, but just think about the words that we always use. We use grind and work hard and work until you puke and all these kind of things. Is there a time and place for that? Absolutely. But I think we really err if we don't understand that there are some other ways that we can achieve that speed and agility. There's ways that we can teach. And actually, there's activities that we can do just to really understand how our teams function. Who are the leaders? How do they prefer? There's one of the reasons why I wrote that book called Creative Coaching Across Three Dimensions is to give coaches 57 specific ideas on all three dimensions of how they can serve their teams and develop them as fully as possible, that holistic kind of approach. So that's what I would encourage. Rethink how we're coaching. Look for, different ways. When I was coaching cross country, we always had fun Fridays because our meets were normally on Saturday. My kids, I went from a team of 7 to over 50 because they understood that if they were part of the cross country team, it was just, excuse me, wild and crazy. And, it's not because I'm anything special. It's just because I think we recognized as a coaching staff and as a team that we needed to be very, very intentional in holistically coaching these kids, and the results would follow.
Just to clarify, the three dimensions were what?
Okay, well, the first dimension is like the physical dimension. Yeah. The second dimension is more the motivation, team cohesion, strategies. And then the third dimension is more the significance, identity, values, purpose, perseverance, all those deep-seated things. And you understand that particularly when you get those second and third dimensions, those are all transferable to life outside of athletics. And that's why it's really important. We're not just developing athletes, we're developing people.
I think we could argue that all three dimensions translate to life outside of athletics.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Fantastic. I know most people watch this after the fact. If somebody does want to reach out to you, whether watching on our show or listening to our podcast, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, through my website, if you wanted to, which is just my name, RebekahTrittipoe.com, or my email, which is Rebekah@RebekahTrittipoe.com.
And for those listening to the podcast, it's Rebekah, Rebekah, at
Correct.
Rebekah Trittipoe, Trittipoe.com. Well, Rebekah, thank you so much for joining me and sharing a little bit of your insight. I hope that coaches and sports professionals listening or watching will take away this valuable information. Just a reminder, everybody, we try to do these shows once every one or 2 weeks. So be sure to subscribe or like or follow wherever you're watching or listening from. But on behalf of myself, Tim, and also Rebekah, thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.